I'm recording you. What are you doing, mister?
I'm trying to cram this back in its box so I can sell it.
Oh, you're gonna sell it?
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm never gonna read the other 5 of these if I never even got through this one.
That's like me with Akata.
Yeah. Except I haven't been highly recommended this series by like 1 million people.
Okay, what am I doing?
You're examining, perusing, admiring even the new fabric that you got from Trads yesterday for your dream once upon a time snow season 2 enchanted forest outfit costume.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, is that descriptive enough?
Yep. So the first fabric I got is, what would you call this? Like a waffle texture?
I don't know. Is that a technical term?
I don't know, I think it is. Waffle, that's the only word that's coming to my mind. And it's, shush. And it's a cream, but I'm thinking of using the back side of it, which is more of like this white. So like this is your yellowy cream, and then this is more white, which is more accurate to the screen version. And then to get the diamond texture, I'm going to like sew lines with my sewing machine and just get that diamond look. So I got, I think 1.5 meters of this because that's all they had left. So hopefully that's enough. So the next fabric I got is this, is it cream again? Or buckwheat? Buckwheat is the only other thing coming to my mind. Linen fabric, 100% linen. And again, I got 1.5 meters of this, and this will be the lining of the jacket. I also got 2 little scrap pieces of this cream beige leather. Yeah, so you can see this one cost $8, and I got another one which was $5. And this will be for the belt. And this fabric, I'm going to be using for the like drapey skirt thingies that go over her pants. And this is actually curtain fabric. And on the right side, it looks like this. So it's this fabric that I'll be using. And this is the like back side of the fabric, which I'll be covering with itself, I think. And I chose curtain fabric because it has a nice drapiness and I think will look really good for that part. And I got 4 meters of this. The final fabric I got is this white cotton, I think it's like a voile, it's a lightweight cotton. Anyway, that will be the undershirt, and I got 2 meters of that. As for other things, I got this cream bias binding, 10 meters of that, and some, I don't know what this is, rope, white rope stuff, and I got 6 meters of that. So this will be for binding all of the edges of the jacket, and then this will be for the ties on the sleeves. And that's everything I got. From Trads at least. I also got some things online. What you doing?
What am I doing?
Uh-huh.
I'm taking photos of this cool book.
What is this cool book?
It is a visual history of arms and armour from the British Royal Armouries. And it's got lots of pretty pictures of weapons and armour from throughout history.
Nice.
Yeah.
How much are you going to sell it for?
I want to keep this one. It's a good coffee table book.
Oh, but we don't have a coffee table.
I'll just put it over there somewhere.
Oh, okay. So the pattern I'm using is this Vogue V9280 pattern, which I've used a couple times before and I really like it. And I'll just be using the Bodice Pattern pieces. So number 1, 4 and 5, and also number 3 for the collar. So if you look at the reference image, I'm going to try and replicate this portion of the bodice, including the collar, and then the sleeves and these panels will be a made-up pattern. So down here I've got my pattern pieces. I've got the fabric on the fold, and I've got pattern pieces 1, 4, 5 and 3. So that's the back bodice pattern, which I have put on the fold, side front pieces, and then also the back collar piece. And as you can see, I've only pinned up to the waistline, and everything below I will disregard because I don't need that. So now I've laid the pattern pieces on top of the linen. So folded the linen in half, and I've got all of the pattern pieces along here. The only one that I've folded over like double twice is the collar piece, just because I want to use this extra linen as some interfacing to make it a bit more thick and provide a bit more structure. And yeah, I'm going to cut these pieces out now. So one of the other things I'm trying to remember to do is cut out all of the notches. So these little triangles here, I'm just going to chop into those. Whoops. And this will give me the markings of where to match up certain pieces. I usually do this with chalk, but I'm going to try out the actually cutting into the fabric just to help me out. And I'm going to do that obviously to all of my pieces. And one other thing that I need to do with this is mark the darts. So these are like these triangle pointy shaped things. And how I do this is I mark it with pins. So you can see the 3 blue pins, and I will just transfer those markings across to each of the pieces with little chalk marking dots. And generally I just sew a straight line from each dot. And yeah, I've pierced the fabric all the way through so I can mark that with chalk. So I've started on the back panels. This is the reference image. So there's the back panels and those are the front ones. And what I did was just measure my waist, divide it by 4, and then add 1.5 centimeters either side, thereabouts-ish, and made those markings. So that's like 5 inches for each panel. And then I've just measured down roughly to where I think it goes, and just made sure that each panel aligns with the one prior to it, and then has that graduating effect up at the waist and then down to the longest part at the center back. And these I'll be using as my pattern pieces, and I'll be cutting these out of both the linen and the outer fabric. So the next thing I've started on are the arm things. These ones here. So the upper arm and the forearm, lower arm thing. And what I did was just measure around my arm and also the length that I need as well. So this is about 8.5 inches. And across the top where the shoulder is, this is 13 inches. it goes down to 12 inches across there. And I've also marked the center front so I can just trace half of the piece and then copy that over to my fabric. As for the lower piece, again, that's 8.5 inches. And then I believe this was 4 inches across. And this one was 6 inches across. And then this is the center front on the fold, and just drew a straight line down from there. So I'll cut out these two pieces, and then like everything else, I'll chop it up from the linen and the outer fabric. Alright, so I did some tests of the like diamond pattern on the outer fabric. So this is what like the look that I'm going for. But I tried it with my cream thread and it just really doesn't show. So what I've done is changed the top color of the thread to this like beigey brown color, and I've left the bobbin to white, or that cream shade, and I did it on the underside of the fabric, and this is what it looks like from the outside, and I really like this effect. This one here, I just did it from the underside rather than, sorry, from the outside rather than from the underside. And yeah, I'm really liking the effect of the two-toned threads. So sewing from the underside, so this is what I actually see when I sew it under the sewing machine. And then when I turn it over, this is what the effect is. And I think that is honestly all I need to achieve this diamond pattern effect. And on here, it does have like a double sort of double line effect, but I think that's just way too much effort. So I'm going to stick with just doing a single line to create the diamond shapes. Look how pretty it looks. So this is just one panel that I've done. You can see on the underside, that's where the darker thread really shows through. And then on the opposite side, it's that nice sort of mix between the two thread colors. So this is what I want all of my pieces to look like. And on this one, I've mapped out where each of the diamond shape lines are going to be. And really all I do, it's the yellow chalk markings, is I try and keep them about, how wide? 2 inches wide. Oh, sorry, maybe like 1.5. Yeah, 1.5 inches wide for each diamond shape. And I just use my ruler to act as a guide as to how the lines go. So I'll leave like between here, like maybe 1 centimeter plus the ruler, and then I'll do a line. And likewise, so maybe leave 1 centimeter or so and then draw the line. So that's how I've been doing it. And then as for angling the next set of lines, I just sort of hold it where I've got it currently and then just sort of move it up, and I'm like, oh yeah, that looks about right. So very much by eye, but that's how I do things and it generally works out. So yeah, I'm going to repeat this process for all of my pattern pieces. Have no idea how long that's going to take, but probably a long time. And yeah, that's the effect that I'm going for. So I'm on to pinning my final dart, and I thought I may as well show you how I do it. So I've got the blue chalk markings here, and this is the lining fabric, so the linen. And I basically just pinch the fabric and make sure that the blue chalk markings are aligned on either side. And then I stick a pin through, and that's it. And I just continue that along the chalk markings. And where it tapers off to the edges, I just put the pins really close to the fold so I know where the fabric needs to, where I need to sew the dart closed. And I'll just pin this top part as well. I think one more, and that should do it. And that's the dart pinned. So I've got 2 darts. This is the front piece, and it's the lining, and obviously this has been done to all the other pieces as well. So what I'm doing now is matching up the notches. So the little, let me zoom in. There we go. So the little triangle bits that I cut out, you can see that those match up, and I'll be pinning right sides together. So now I'm matching up the notches on the side front, and I'm pinning this right sides together. The notches are the little triangles that I cut out earlier, making sure they match up, and then pinning along the seam. So at this part here where there's the curve, one edge is actually shorter than the other, or like, yeah, so one side is shorter, so you need to like ease the fabric, and it's okay if there's a little bit of puckering along the very outer edges where the raw seams are, but you just got to make sure to pin the fabric so it's flat where the sewing lines will be. So for this I use just a lot of pins, and you can start seeing that where the pin line is going to be flat, and then out here is where that puckering will be. And later on I'll chop off all of this excess seam allowance to make the seam a lot smoother from the outside. So here's one side all pinned. You can see that's where the curved section is, so I've really put a lot of pins in there. And yeah, basically sew through that, and then it should look something like this, which is already sewn down. And I haven't yet ironed it or trimmed the seam allowance, but like I said before, you can see that this is puckering, but where the seam is all flat. So yeah, and I sew this with roughly a 1 centimeter seam allowance. I think the pattern allows for 1.5 centimeters, but I just never do that for some reason. But yeah, I'm pretty lenient with seam allowance. So I'm trying to be a good little seamstress while I do this. So I'm going to actually clip and iron all of my seams as I go. So to clip seams, first I trim down the seam allowance. So I trim down maybe a bit less than half of the current seam allowance, just to get some of that bulk fabric out of the way. And once I've done that, I'm going to clip my seam allowance. So clipping the seam allowance is really helpful at curves of the fabric, especially when you're turning it right side out or to the outside, because it really helps those curves lay smoothly. So I've trimmed off that seam allowance now, and basically with clipping your seam allowance, you've got to find where the curved sections are. So this here is quite curved, and down here is straight. So down here I won't worry about putting in any clips, but at the curved edges I will. So it's basically cutting in those little notches, those little triangles at various points along that edge. And I usually do these about 1 to 2 inches apart, depending on how much I think it needs. So I'll probably do a couple more, and then I'm calling this done, and over to the iron it will go. So those are the clipped edges. I find it very hard to get rid of some of these fluffy bits, so let me trim those down now. All right. I think that's enough, so I've just put 4 in there, maybe 1 more down here. All right, and let's take it over to the ironing board. So to iron the seam, I start at one of the edges. I'll start at the easier edge this time. So this is the bottom edge where it's straight. I've just realized that it's a bit bulky down here, so I'm just going to trim some of that bulk out. And I do it the same way that I add those notches, just cut in a little triangle, and that should help get rid of the excess fabric. So that's what's come out just at that really bulky seam down there. All right, so then I open the seam so that the seam allowance goes to either side, and then I run the iron over it. And make sure your iron is set to the right temperature as well for the fabric that you're using. I've got it on a silk wool setting. I have no idea what this fabric is, but I most definitely know it's not like 100% natural fibers, so I don't want to burn through it. And I just give this a really good press and open those seams open. Open those seams open. Gosh, iron those seams open. And there you go, you can see that that's looking much better already. And from the outside, it's nice and flat. And you can see that this still needs to be flattened. So just continue that where the curved edges are as well. And this is easier if you have like a tailor's ham where you can iron it over a curve, but I don't have that, so I'm just going to do my best on this flat surface of the ironing table. All right, so the seam has been ironed open, and you can see that with those notches cut in the seam allowance, it helps the fabric lie nice and smooth. And from the outside, you've got a very nice seam. This one's a princess seam going along the side front. And yeah, basically you need to repeat this whole process of trimming down the seam allowance, clipping it at the curved edges, and ironing the seam allowance open for all of the pieces. So that's all of the fashion fabric as well as the lining fabric. So now that both of the side, front, and front pieces have been attached to one another, it's time to sew the side seams. So the side seams are going to attach to this back piece, this giant back piece. There's the center back. Here's the back collar piece, which has been interlined with some of the linen just to give it a bit more structure. And what I will be doing is pinning to each side the side of the front pieces. So this seam along here. Again, matching up with the notches. So those are the 2 notches here, and pinning that down. And then sewing that, and after that, I will sew the other side obviously, and then it will be the shoulder seams. I can show that a bit later. Okay, so I've just sewn the side seam on one side, and now I'm going to sew the shoulder seam. Again, matching the notches at the shoulder seam, pinning that in place, and then pinning either side of that to make sure everything aligns. Oh, there's another notch at the top here at the collar piece. So matching that one up, pinning it in place. And then everything else should more or less align, and pinning it all in place before I sew that shoulder and collar piece down. I've just also decided that along this collar piece, I'm going to actually understitch this. So basically stitching along the seam allowance and attaching the collar, like doing a top, almost like doing a top stitch. So there'll be a stitch along here, and that will help keep the collar standing upwards because I don't want it to start drooping like that. So yeah, I'm just going to quickly do that now before I move on. There, can you see that? There's the stitching along the collar. You can barely see it, but that just helps keep this seam allowance up and keeping the collar standing upwards as well. Anyway, now I'll continue sewing the collar and the shoulder seam. Okay, so I've given it all a very good press with the iron, and you can see all of the seams are now pressed nice and flat, and all of the curved edges or bulky seams have been clipped. So that's what the inside's looking like. We've got the back, the side fronts, and the collar piece, which then connects to the front pieces. And then if I turn it to the right side, this is sort of what it looks like from the front, starting to take shape, and the back looks like, gosh, I'm doing a very rough job at showing you, but the back looks like this with this V shape in the center back, and the collar piece is looking very nice and standing upright thanks to that understitching that I did. And yeah, I'm very pleased with it so far, and I've got a busy day today, so today's Saturday, so I won't probably get around to doing more on this until tomorrow. So here's a little fit check. It's looking good so far. I may need to cut into this more because I think hers is more open along the front, but so far so good. I love how the collar is standing up already on its own without any of the lining or the binding yet, and I'm really liking how these front seams are looking. I like that it's not too tight, so I can easily wear it comfortably with an undershirt underneath. And let's see if I can show you the back. The back's looking fine. I never really care about the back too much. And yeah, loving it so far. So excited.